The air was thick with salt and the promise of freedom as Mia and her three friends, Jake, Sarah, and Liam, rolled into the sleepy beach town of Coral Hollow. It was spring break, 2019, and the Florida coast shimmered under a late March sun. They'd snagged a cheap rental cabin a mile from the main strip, a weathered shack with peeling paint and a sagging porch. The online reviews had called it rustic, but the smell of mildew hit them like a wet slap as they stepped inside. Still, they laughed it off. Cheap was cheap, and the beach was all they cared about. The first day was a blur of sunscreen, beer, and waves. By nightfall, they sprawled on the sand with a bonfire spitting embers into the dark. The beach was oddly quiet for spring break. No thumping music, no crowds, just the rhythmic crash of the tide and a scattering of distant figures along the shore. Mia noticed a group of locals watching them from a dune, their silhouettes stiff and unmoving. "Creepy much?" she muttered, nudging Jake. He shrugged, cracking another beer. "Probably just jealous we're having fun." That night, the cabin creaked like it was alive. Mia woke to a sound, like wet footsteps slapping the wooden floor. She sat up, heart thudding, peering into the shadows of the cramped room she shared with Sarah. The bed across from her was empty. "Sarah?" she whispered. No answer. The footsteps stopped, replaced by a low, guttural hum vibrating through the walls. It wasn't a machine, it felt alive, like something breathing just out of sight. She grabbed her phone, 3:17 a.m. No signal. The hum grew louder, pressing against her skull, and then, silence. She stumbled into the hall, the air damp and heavy. Jake and Liam's room was empty too, their sleeping bags crumpled like they'd left in a hurry. The front door hung ajar, swaying gently, as if beckoning her outside. Barefoot, she stepped onto the porch, the night unnaturally still. The beach stretched before her, silver under the moon, but something was wrong, the tide was gone. Where waves had crashed hours ago, there was only a vast, glistening expanse of wet sand, stretching farther than it should. And then she saw it, a figure standing at the edge of the vanished water, too far to make out, but unmistakably watching her. Mia's breath caught as the figure raised an arm, not waving, but pointing. A chill slithered down her spine. She called out, her voice swallowed by the oppressive quiet. The figure didn't move, but the sand around it rippled, like something massive shifted beneath. She blinked, and it was gone. The tide roared back in an instant, a wall of water slamming the shore with a sound like a scream. She staggered back inside, locking the door, her mind racing. Where were her friends? What had she just seen? The hum started again, louder, closer, rattling the windows, and she realized it wasn't coming from outside. Mia's hands shook as she barricaded the cabin door with a chair, the hum now a relentless pulse vibrating through the floorboards. It was 3:45 a.m., and her friends were gone, beds empty, phones left behind, screens dark. She grabbed a flashlight from Jake's bag, its beam trembling as she swept it across the room. The walls glistened with a thin sheen of moisture, like the cabin was sweating. She called their names again, her voice cracking, but the only response was the hum, now joined by a faint scratching, like nails dragging across wood. She forced herself to step outside, the air thick and briny, the tide crashing closer than before. The flashlight caught something in the sand, footprints, barefoot and uneven, leading toward the water. They weren't hers. She followed them, heart hammering, until they vanished at the edge of the surf. The beam flicked upward, and she froze, a shape bobbed in the waves, too far to identify but unmistakably human. "Jake?" she screamed, but the figure sank beneath the surface, leaving only ripples. Panic clawed at her as she turned back toward the cabin, but the flashlight dimmed, flickering out. In the sudden dark, she heard it, a wet, gurgling laugh, close enough to feel the breath on her neck. She bolted, stumbling over driftwood, the sand sucking at her feet like it wanted to pull her down. The cabin loomed ahead, but its silhouette was wrong, taller, warped, like it had grown in the shadows. The hum exploded into a roar as she reached the porch, and the door slammed shut before she could touch it. Through the window, she saw movement, 3 figures inside, standing still, their heads tilted at impossible angles, They weren't moving, but their eyes glinted in the dark, locked on her. Spring break 2021 had promised escape for Ethan and his college buddies, Nate, Chloe, and Tara. They'd opted for a road trip down the East Coast, chasing cheap thrills and cheaper gas. By the third day, exhaustion set in, and a flickering neon sign off Route 9 in rural Georgia caught their eye. Motel Haven vacancy. The place looked like it hadn't been touched since the 70s, peeling wallpaper, a gravel lot choked with weeds, and a clerk who barely glanced up from his yellowed paperback. His name tag read, Roy, and his smile was a jagged line of teeth. Room 12's open, he rasped, sliding a key across the counter. Last one. The room smelled of stale cigarettes and something sour, but they were too tired to care. 2 sagging beds, a TV that buzzed with static, and a bathroom with a cracked mirror, it'd do for the night. They dumped their bags and cracked open a few beers, the hum of cicadas seeping through the thin walls. Chloe swore she heard whispering from the room next door, but Tara laughed it off. It's just the wind, drama queen. Still, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, like eyes lingered just beyond the grimy window blinds. Around midnight, Nate jolted awake, swearing he'd seen a shadow move across the wall. No one there, just the dim glow of the parking lot lights seeping in. Ethan checked the door, still locked. They brushed it off as road fatigue and tried to sleep. But then the TV flicked on by itself, blasting static so loud it shook the room. Chloe yanked the plug from the wall, but the screen stayed lit, a grainy image flickering into focus, a grainy shot of the motel's exterior, their car parked out front. What the hell? Tara whispered. The camera panned slowly, revealing a figure standing by their car, head tilted, face obscured by a hood. Then the screen cut to black. They rushed to the window, hearts pounding. The parking lot was empty, no figure, no movement, just their beat-up Honda sitting alone under the buzzing light. Nate grabbed the key, insisting they check the car. Ethan hesitated. Something felt wrong, like the air itself was holding its breath. As they stepped outside, the motel's neon sign flickered off, plunging the lot into darkness. A low chuckle echoed from somewhere behind the building, sharp and guttural, and the gravel crunched under footsteps that weren't theirs. The car's headlights flared on, blinding them, and Ethan froze as a shadow darted across the beam, too fast, too wrong, like it didn't belong to a person. Ethan shielded his eyes as the car's headlights blazed, the shadow vanishing as quickly as it appeared. The chuckle echoed again, bouncing off the motel walls, and Nate fumbled with the car key, shouting, "We're leaving, now!" Chloe and Tara sprinted from the room, bags forgotten, as the gravel crunched louder, footsteps circling them in the dark. The neon sign flared back on, bathing the lot in a sickly green glow, and Ethan glimpsed it, a figure hunched by the dumpster, limbs too long, head cocked like it was listening. They piled into the Honda, Nate jamming the key into the ignition. The engine sputtered then died. "Come on!" Tara yelled, slamming the dashboard. The motel's windows lit up one by one, silhouettes pressing against the glass, motionless, watching. The chuckle turned into a hiss, and something scraped the car's roof, slow and deliberate. Ethan twisted around, but the back window was fogged, streaked with handprints that hadn't been there before. Nate tried again, and the engine roared to life. He floored it, tires spinning in the gravel, but the car lurched to a stop after 10 feet, like something held it back. The rearview mirrors showed nothing but darkness, until a face loomed into view, pale, eyeless, grinning through jagged teeth. Chloe screamed as the car shook, metal groaning, and the windows cracked in spiderweb patterns. The radio burst on, spitting static and a garbled voice. "Stay, stay." Then the grip released, and they peeled onto Route 9, the motel shrinking in the mirror, except for the figure, now standing in the road, growing larger as they sped away. It was spring break 2023, and the group, Lila, Marcus, Jess, and Owen, had heard whispers about Crescent Bay, a coastal spot in Northern California where the parties were wild and the vibes were weird. They arrived at dusk, the beach town draped in fog, its pier jutting into the ocean like a skeletal finger. A pop-up carnival had taken over the boardwalk, rickety rides, warped funhouse mirrors, and a Ferris wheel creaking in the wind. Locals handed out flyers with smudged ink. "Midnight Masquerade, join us!" The group figured it was some quirky spring break gimmick and decided to check it out. The carnival buzzed with an odd energy. Calliope music warped by static, vendors with too wide smiles selling cotton candy that smelled faintly of rust. Jess dared Marcus to try the ring toss, but the carny running it just stared, his eyes glassy, before handing over a prize without a word, a chipped porcelain doll with one eye missing. "Creepy as hell," Marcus muttered, tossing it into a trash bin. The carny's grin stretched wider, and he whispered something under his breath that sounded like, "You'll see." As midnight approached, the crowd thinned, leaving the four of them wandering toward the pier's end where the masquerade was set to start. The fog thickened, swallowing the lights until the carnival felt like a dream slipping away. A figure in a tattered jester costume appeared, holding a lantern that cast a sickly yellow glow. "Mask-san," he croaked, handing them each a paper mask, crude, hand-painted faces with empty eye holes. Lila hesitated, but peer pressure won out. They slipped them on, the paper damp against their skin, and followed him into the fog. The pier stretched longer than it should have, planks groaning underfoot. The jester led them to a tent pitched at the edge, its flaps fluttering despite the still air. Inside, the air was rancid, wet earth and something metallic. A circle of figures stood waiting, their own masks smeared with what looked like dried blood. The jester clapped, and the tent flaps snapped shut behind them. Lila's mask tightened, pressing into her face like it was fusing to her skin. She clawed at it, but Owen grabbed her wrist, his voice trembling. "Don't! Look!" In the center of the circle, the floorboards split open, revealing a black, writhing mass that pulsed like a heartbeat, and it was rising. The tense air grew colder as the black mass pulsed upward, tendrils snaking through the cracked floorboards. Lila's mask burned against her face, her fingers bleeding as she clawed at it, useless. Marcus grabbed Jess, shouting, "We need to go!" But the tent flaps were gone, replaced by sagging canvas walls that bulged inward. The masked figures stepped closer, their movements jerky, like puppets on frayed strings. The jester's lantern swung, casting shadows that twisted into claws across the ground. Owen yanked at the floorboards, revealing a rusted trapdoor beneath the writhing mass. "Down there!" he hissed, prying it open. The group hesitated, the hole reeked of decay, and a faint moan echoed from below, but the tendrils lashed out, grazing Jess's leg. She screamed, blood welling through her jeans, and they scrambled into the dark. The trapdoor slammed shut behind them, plunging them into a damp, narrow tunnel. The walls were slick with algae, etched with claw marks that glowed faintly in the gloom. They stumbled forward, the moans growing louder, overlapping into a chorus of agony. Lila's mask tightened again, and she swore it whispered her name, low and insistent. Ahead, the tunnel split, left, a flickering light, right, a rhythmic drip like water or blood. Marcus pushed toward the light, but Owen stopped, pointing at the ground, their own footprints, circling back, though they'd only moved forward. The jester's laugh rang out, impossibly close, and the light ahead blinked out, replaced by a pair of glowing eyes hovering in the dark, watching, waiting.